Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the government and political correspondent for Western Wisconsin Journal. And today we have a different format. Rather than an interview of a single person or candidate, we have a candidate forum. And we're starting with two of the three candidates who are running for the 30th Assembly District. We have Scott Nelson and Shannon Zimmerman. And joining us shortly will be Aaron Taylor, and he will be coming during our format, just because of scheduling issues we needed to get started. So with that, to let the folks know how we're doing this, rather than any kind of debate like you might see with the presidential or senatorial candidates, this is not going to be moderated where there's going to be any kind of truth temperature given or anything like that. What we're doing is we're introducing topics, and the purpose here is to get the candidates to speak about different issues, and where they may agree, and where they disagree, that's for the viewers to determine how their views may match up with yours ultimately. So what we're going to start with is let each of you introduce yourselves with a background and just tell our audience what qualifies you to run for this position, and or why are you running. And you have a minute. And I'm going to start with Shannon, and we're going to have 60 seconds, so go ahead and begin.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for having us both here tonight. I greatly appreciate it. I have lived in River Falls for the past 20 years. My wife and I, we have 2 adult sons, and we are blessed with 4 grandchildren also. My wife and I grew up in Western Wisconsin from the most humblest beginnings, kind of came up tough, and started a business in 1996 in the area. That business, through a lot of trials and tribulations, has been able to grow over time, and we're now one of the largest employers in the area. And in fact, in 2011, the St. Croix County Business of the Year. The lessons learned in that process undoubtedly have prepared me for the negotiations that are required at the government level. My motivation to do so is actually based on my family, my friends, these employees who all call this area home. So my intention is to go to Madison to represent their interests passionately.
All right. Thank you very much. You held it under the 60 seconds. I didn't realize how short a time that was. But Scott, I guess we'll start. I'm going to reset my timer, and you have 60 seconds. Again, background and why you're running.
Great. Thanks, Jamie, for inviting us. Yeah, I'm Scott Nelson. I live in the town of Hudson. I grew up in Stoughton, Wisconsin. 1984, I joined the United States Air Force, where I became a fireman. I was in the Air Force until 1988. Moved up here in 1990. Took my full-time job as a fire department person at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. I worked there until 2015, 25 plus years. I retired as a fire captain. 2014, I was elected in District 8 for the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors. Just recently re-elected to the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors. I'm on the Transportation Committee, Public Protection Committee, Transportation Subcommittee, and a couple other ad hoc committees. The reason I'm running is I've seen what's going on at the local level, especially at the county level. I see what Madison's trying to do, and I want to make sure we bring a voice down to Madison from this area.
Very good. All right. So we will allow Aaron to introduce himself when he comes. And so I'm going to reset my clock, and we're going to take the issues a little bit out of order, but I figure we will start where my passion is right now, where me serving with the school board here in the Hudson School District. Let's start with 4K through 12th grade education. This will be a 90-second subject, and we'll start this time with Scott. Scott, go ahead.
Okay. Well, as you know, I graduated from Stoughton High School. I was a public educated kid. And I think a public education is a valuable experience to have. But for us to have valuable experience and good education, we need the funding for that. And now we have an issue with voucher schools coming in, taking some of the money from the public education going towards the voucher system. If we need to back education, we need to do it financially, but fiscally smart about it. And we have to make sure that the schools have the tools. They need to fix the funding formula because the funding formula is actually making an uneven playing field. And we need to treat all kids equally between the cities and the farms and even up in the Northwoods where they need to have the help too. And I think that's important for all kids because they're the future that we have going forth in this state. And we need to make sure that as legislatures, we need to listen to our state superintendent. He's the expert in the field. I know things like that because from my county board experience, on the committees I'm on, I don't sit there and dictate to what they can do. They come to us and we try to provide the means to do their job as best we can based on what the taxes are and what the budget is, what we do. I don't dictate to them. They basically come to us and say, this is our request and you need to work it. It is kind of a strange way to do things sometimes, but it's actually the correct way to do it.
All right, thank you. Now, reset my clock, and now it's your turn, Shannon, to tell us maybe how you would approach 4K to 12 education.
Sure. First of all, the foundation that we're talking about here, the beginning stages of education is so important right now, and it's so important to our community, to our state, and to our impact globally. So I've been a huge proponent of funding for schools at all levels, but I think that there's a lot of ways to look at this. Both of my boys, myself included, public school. My grandchildren now are entering the public schools in this area. And I watch all of the creative ways that they're getting involved and getting engaged. I think that we do need to support our public schools. I think as students move on in the process, so I'm going to focus for a moment on the upper end of this, maybe the 10, 11, and 12 range. There's opportunities also at that level for these students to become exposed to private sector business, potentially occupations that may interest them. Not all students are going to go on for a 4-year degree or for a 2-year degree at a technical college. So I think it's important as they're reaching those advanced stages that we are also exposing them to different opportunities to help them shape and maybe decide which path they want to take. I think as legislatures, we have a responsibility to also be fiscally mindful, certainly to the taxpayer in Wisconsin. But that said, I think that we need to make sure that we are properly funding these schools so that we can go on to reach success in the years to come.
All right, very good. Now we're going to have another subject that's very similar, again, still on the subject of education, but this time it's higher education, and it's meant to be a broader topic, not just our 4-year institutions, but certainly one thing that has been in the news a lot lately is our UW system and the funding there and some of the issues that the Board of Regents have gone through. So I'm going to throw this one out there and start with Shannon, since we started the last one with Scott, and how might you fix or improve our higher education system in Wisconsin?
Yeah, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. As an employer in the area, we work very interactively with UW River Falls, and so as one higher ed institution, we are incredibly active. We have an array of interns. We hire a number of their graduates every year. In fact, that involvement extends into the family. My sons both went to school there. I participate on the Chancellor's Advisory Committee. I'm on the UW Foundation Board. And what that has allowed me to do is gain perspective into their world. I understand the challenges that they're facing, and it's not so simple. I fully appreciate the implications of some of the tax cuts. Now, that said, I think that there's creative ways we can resolve this. As an employer in this area who is fighting fiercely to fill jobs, they have a lot of talent there. I want to get integrated more effectively and sooner in the process with those institutions. My belief is that there is an opportunity where the educational system, private sector business can come together and save money.
Okay. Now, that went by really fast because that was intended to be a 60-second answer, and so we'll turn it over to...
Do like 10 seconds?
All right, I'll give you 10 seconds so that you can start the wrap up a little sooner, but that was a good job, Shannon. All right.
Okay.
So now, Scott, the challenge is over to you to try and get this done in 60 seconds, the higher education system in general, not necessarily just the university.
All right. Higher ed, University of Wisconsin is the cornerstone of our state. and education in our state, not only at the 4-year level, but at the 2-year level, is very important. Because there's a lot of technical jobs out there that people can fill. And we need to make sure that they're funded adequately too. You look at a fire protection degree, that's a 2-year degree. Then if you go to fire administration, that's a 4-year degree. They work hand in hand. But we need to be able to have an avenue for many of these kids to go to school and know that there's going to be the programs are there and they're not slowly going to go away. Now, I'll talk to the veteran side of it that goes hand in hand with what Shannon was talking about. We need to be able to have veterans come back and use their experience in the military to get credits to work in college too. That's a business side of it. This is a veteran side of it, because I've read a lot of stories where veterans have had a hard time getting their credits into college because of their experience with the military. So I think that can work with business and veterans.
Very good. All right, thank you for those perspectives. Now, we'll reset the watch, and it's kind of moving along pretty well. I guess if I keep my talking to a minimum, it's more for the candidates, so that's a good thing. Now, here's a challenge. It's a longer question, the longest answer that we have, and that's 2 minutes to discuss a pretty general area, but intended to be included in there is the economy, jobs, and minimum wage. What do you think the state's role is, and what would you like to do if you get elected down in Madison to promote our economy and create jobs and better paying jobs? So 2 minutes, and I guess this time we start with Scott. Go ahead.
Being at the county level, I understand that I could see where government and business has to work together to make sure we get that infrastructure so we can help promote businesses that come in, and also to have the businesses that are here accelerate and do well. But we also have to make sure that we watch out for the taxpayers' well-being. But you also know it takes money to make money sometimes, and when you're dealing with infrastructure and developing these economic areas, that's what you need to do. But we have to stay away from some businesses trying to leverage themselves against the taxpayers or the cities. So that's what legislators need to do. But you also need to promote what we have in this area. It's a very diverse area, especially being to the basically the suburbs of the Twin Cities almost. But we have to have our own identity too. And also when it comes to infrastructure, as part of promoting this area and having businesses come in, we need to make sure that we have a good foundation. In St. Croix County, being on the Transportation Committee, I see a lot of our transportation needs because we need to get from here to there for the businesses. We also need to be able to get the employees from one place to another. And the one thing I'm working on in the Transportation Subcommittee is they're doing a thing between River Falls, New Richmond, and Hudson. Is the Regional Planning Commission is seeing what the feasibility is to have more of a transportation system. Because if there's an individual, and I've told this story before, might have gotten a little bit of trouble, has no way to get to work, he might work for Shannon. We should be able to have an avenue for them to have some type of transportation to get there, if it's not a short commuter route or anything. But you have to start the ball rolling. And as this area is growing as fast as it is, we have to have foresight into what we really need to do to get it going.
All right, you're under your 2 minutes. And now, Shannon, what do you see as where the state legislator ought to get involved with the economy, jobs, minimum wage? What can we do?
All right. Obviously, a topic near and dear to my heart as a business startup guy, a person who cares tremendously for both small, mid, and large businesses. I'm passionate here. So, first of all, I think that we have to, in this area, embrace the entrepreneurial culture, and that does incorporate all of the local businesses, the educational centers, and the service organizations. So, for example, when you're starting a business, you need access to accounting and finance, legal. The state has to promote that identity. District 30 is sitting adjacent to a monstrous metropolitan, and one could look at this as a revenue opportunity for small business. We have to foster the culture of startup. We have to help businesses to the degree that we can promote themselves. I think that identity across the river, for example, helps tremendously. We need to recruit great businesses to this area. And my experiences here in having opened offices around the world from our little company in River Falls, I feel really prepares me to understand what it is that those prospective companies are going to be looking for in our area. I think a legislator's job is to make it conducive for good business in the area. Not to cover for the sins of poorly operating businesses, maybe as Scott alluded to, but to make it an environment that is conducive and helpful and, if you will, open for business in the state of Wisconsin.
Very good. All right. Now, as just kind of a refresher for those viewers that maybe have tuned us in while in the middle of this, this is a candidate forum for the 30th Assembly District. And with us is Democrat Scott Nelson, Republican Shannon Zimmerman, and soon to be joining us, I hope, is independent candidate Aaron Taylor. And what we've talked about so far is education and jobs. Now we're going to kind of get down into other areas. There was lots of topics, and so we had a little challenge of narrowing them down. But at this time, I think we've heard the term transportation mentioned, so let's talk about the state's role in transportation and infrastructure. We've designated 90 seconds for this, and so we'll start with Shannon. Okay. And what do you think we ought to be doing in this area to improve that transportation infrastructure?
Well, first I want to acknowledge the relevance, the importance of transportation. We are a state where manufacturing, agriculture, transportation as industry is substantial. We live in an area where not only our residents require and should enjoy adequate roadways, but the business and economic segment here also is an influencing component, because companies that may start here or companies that may consider moving here are going to also hold us to high standards there. So I acknowledge it as vitally important. Now, the facts are, it needs to be addressed. I think that most agree that the state's transportation infrastructure requires attention. The state has been borrowing as a means of resolving this issue. I personally am not a fan of doing that going forward. I think the issue needs to get addressed. Now, the manner in which we do that, thus far, gas tax is something that's one of the ways that we derive revenue, or the state derives revenue for this. This is a complicated issue because we have higher efficiency vehicles, and that could impact the potency, if you will, of a gas tax. So I think that all options are on the table. Look, I've run a lot of budgets. I want to look at the broad budget and understand where we can obtain funds, but I'm committed to resolving it because it needs to get done.
Very good. All right, now I'll reset my clock. And Scott, you have 90 seconds to talk about transportation and infrastructure.
Well, it's a huge issue, and it's something that's, and I'm tired of the term kick down the road. Maybe we've been pushing it down the road, and that's basically not a good way to do business. So with my experience and seeing how they're doing the funding for that, you need to really explore the gas tax, because we're at a lower price right now for gas, and we need to start thinking as legislators or people in Madison, sunset clause isn't a bad thing. It shouldn't be a swear word. You put it at 6 years. You talk to the transportation professionals and say, how much funding do we need and how many years and what's our projection? And let's make that a sunset clause. Because what a lot of people like to say, well, they never take that tax off. Well, you have to make the decision to put it on when you do it. You have to make the decision to take it off, and you shouldn't let it keep rolling on. You need to make the hard decisions. And the other thing that we're lucky with here in St. Croix County is that the Transportation Committee and the Transportation Department is always looking forward. And as a state, I don't think we've been looking forward. They just got $223 million off from the highway funding for down in Milwaukee. And that's huge. That's a huge economic generator down there in Milwaukee. And they're pitting a lot of Madison versus Milwaukee, or the rest of the state versus Milwaukee. We're all in this together. So we need to get these problems addressed, and as fast as we can, and the better.
All right. Very good. I guess we'll move along then to health care. Now, this is another issue that obviously has had a lot of attention on the federal level, and then on the state level, of course, we've had the issue about whether Wisconsin wants to opt in on the Obamacare and so forth. So on the topic of health care, what do you see the state of Wisconsin's role? And this time we'll start with Scott. You have 90 seconds.
Well, healthcare is huge. That's one of our biggest budgets in the county. It's probably one of the bigger budgets in the state. And when you have the ability to take federal funds to take care of people and help people, that's something that you should be able to do. And we haven't been doing that. And now it's been casting the burden on other on a lot of the citizens that need that help. And I don't understand why we would pass up on that, because that's money that we've put in. Now we should be able to use that to our benefit. And that's the other thing. And the other cost that's really going up, and St. Croix County has done it, and hopefully the state will lead, because we're one of the first counties to do dementia care. We need to take care of our elderly. People are getting older. I mean, a couple of years ago I thought I was 25. Now I'm already 51. So that's kind of how it goes. And we need to make sure that we're looking out for the best and stop being stuck on these ideologies that just because it's Obamacare, that it's a bad thing. But I tell you, it needs to be tweaked. It's been understandable. Governor Dayton has already said there's been some issues. But not everything that starts right away works perfectly. It's just like starting a business, any type of thing like that. You're going to have some issues. But the problem is we need to tighten it up a little bit faster, because we have a lot of experts out there, and I don't know if they're either putting input in or we're not listening to their voices.
Okay. We are going to be taking a break after Shannon's answers the healthcare question, and we'll get Aaron introduced and maybe caught up a little bit. So I'll reset my clock, and Shannon, you have 90 seconds to talk about your position with the state's role in healthcare.
You bet. Healthcare is a vital subject, and we have to be considerate of those those in need, the elderly, and so forth. I think the state's role in healthcare is to protect the most vulnerable, those perhaps without the means, certainly to cover their healthcare. This is the important areas where I think state plays a role. Now, more broadly, I can tell you firsthand experience. Our company was just given its new premiums, and we almost fell off our chair as a result, I think, of some of the increases, as a result maybe of decisions made at the federal level. Obamacare was not financially viable. And to your point, maybe it requires change, maybe dramatic change, but I think that the issue needs to be is we need to look at healthcare in a broad light. Who are the providers? What's the cost base? How are we encouraging free markets, competition, so we don't have EpiPen sort of issues again, where a company can essentially hold someone hostage, if you will. So I think that we have to promote heavily and support heavily healthcare, but I also believe government's role is not to bear the full cost of that and pass it on to the taxpayers at all.
All right, very good. We'll stop there, and we'll do a little shuffling of chairs. So we're going to take a slight break and come back with our extra guest. Hello, I'm Jamie Johnson. Welcome back to Western Wisconsin Journal. And with the magic of television, we've just gone from 2 guests to 3 guests. Joining us now is Aaron Taylor. And since the other candidates that were able to be here, and Aaron, I know that you had a work issue. You have a day job in addition to being running for office. So we're going to allow you to catch up a little bit. We're going to give you a minute to introduce yourself, and then we're going to have you hit on the topics of the economy and jobs, education, and transportation before you answer the healthcare question, which is the last one that I think Scott answered first. So with that, why don't you give us 60 seconds, if you will, of background and qualifications, and maybe answer the question of why you are running for this position.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Sorry I'm late, but got to work to pay the bills.
Okay.
We all do as good taxpayers. My name's Aaron Taylor. I've lived in Wisconsin for 17 years, but for the past 10 years, I've lived in District 30. I went to college at UW River Falls. In 2006 I started, graduated in 2011. I just love this area so much, and I have so many roots that I put down here that I couldn't get away. And then I started getting involved in the community, first on the River Falls Police, Ambulance, and Fire Commission. Did a couple years of that and wanted to step up and get more involved. So I was elected to River Falls City Council in 2014, and I just finished in 2016 in April when I decided to take the next step and try and help our state government get better, which brings me to why I'm running for Wisconsin State Assembly. I think it's time for my generation to start taking responsibility for Wisconsin and our futures to kind of take over from parents and my grandparents' generation. What they have done has helped us a lot, but it's also kind of shortchanged my generation. And I just feel that I'm a lot more equipped to make things work between everyone than is currently going on in Madison.
Okay, and I think you're alluding to the fact you're running, we should clarify again, because I introduced the other two with their party affiliations. You're running as independent.
Correct.
And all right, so now getting into the economy, jobs, minimum wage. Why don't you give us 60 seconds, because since you are not affiliated with one of the two major parties and that have platforms and so forth, what is your position for how the state government ought to be addressing our current economy, job situation, maybe even minimum wage?
First of all, I believe to address one important issue to me is the minimum wage, not just the average worker's minimum wage, but specifically the server's minimum wage, the tip worker's minimum wage. I think it's about $283 right now, if I remember correctly. $233. All right, thank you. And that needs to be brought up very, very quickly to at least the minimum, because there are people who there aren't jobs for them anywhere else, and they have to have a tipping job, and they can't pay their taxes, they can't pay their rent, they can't support themselves. Beyond that, raising the minimum wage, we need to raise that, but we also need to look at all the other economic factors of the cost of living, because if we just increase minimum wage, everything else could go up at the same time. So that's controlling health care, rent. How the state could do that is by attracting more people to our state so we could get a bigger tax base to lessen the burden for everyone.
Very good. All right. Well, you mentioned health care, but before we touch on that subject, I wanted to hit education. The other two candidates were able to discuss their plans for both 4K to 12 and higher education. And if you don't mind, if you can address both those in about 90 seconds, all right?
Okay, I will do my best. So I went to Wisconsin public education from 1999 until 2011 through the state university system and down in Sun Prairie, which is right by Madison. So I saw the shortcomings and the successes that our education system had pre the current administration. Don't want to say ruining it for the teachers, but it feels like they kind of did ruin it for the educators, university and teachers, K through 12. The right to organize, their willingness to tough out the low wages to build Wisconsin's future. They're going to other states. We push them that hard, and we need to reverse some of those things, whether it be giving back the right to organize or putting more punch back into the organization and giving the universities their money back, so that way we could keep the high educators, which I feel my generation needs college to transition from that young adult into full adulthood because of the opportunities that are around now. And the professors are leaving because we can't sustain them. The universities' programs are going down, and UW River Falls and UW Systems doing a great job of trying to manage that as well as they can, but it feels like they don't get the support they need from the state.
All right, very good. Now, the last catch-up topic, if you will, would be the transportation infrastructure. And if you could have maybe 60 seconds, tell us where you would stand with how you would improve or how you would address transportation and the infrastructure both. Start.
So for transportation and infrastructure, I don't do a whole lot of traveling on the interstate, but I always see construction going on. So I feel that we're doing a really good job at maintaining our interstate as well as we can. I know we'd all like to have an expanded highway, 6 lanes from Minneapolis, St. Paul, all the way down to Chicago, and maybe in the future we could do that. But I think the big thing now is getting state funds out to the county and the cities to start improving on some of their roads that we need to get. We're getting subdivisions, we're getting business parks springing up everywhere where they're just 2-lane country roads that aren't safe, that they're not priorities for the county or city because they don't have the money, whether it be plowing. People need to get to work if they want to live here. How we could go about funding that is increasing the gas tax, which, from my understanding, hasn't been increased in a long time.
All right. Very good. Now that brings us to healthcare and your answer with the state's role in healthcare. It's been in the news a lot regarding the federal. I think that's about the point with you walked in the room, so maybe you were able to hear the other two candidates' answers. How would you address it? And you have 90 seconds.
First thing, I fully support the Affordable Care Act, and I believe that Wisconsin is missing out on huge amounts. I think it's $500 million of federal funding from the government if we fully buy into it. And as Scott was saying before, it's been 6 years in the making, and there's been a lot of resistance I don't really see any good reason of why we're avoiding it. We'll work out the kinks. Once we get it all worked out, I think the costs will be controlled because, as Shannon said, the costs are increasing drastically. I have friends who see it. I have friends who would have had to pay the penalty for not being able to afford the inexpensive parts of it. But once everyone buys into it, and it's a system that we see works all over the world, in United Kingdom, in our neighbors to the north, Canada. It benefits them. You simply just walk in and say, this is what's wrong with me. Can I be fixed? And the medical debt for our elderly, people don't have to raid their pensions to pay for a simple sickness. Someone gets pneumonia, it could cost $150,000. And that's not fair to the people. The government is trying to help, but they're not being let to help.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I want to thank the other two candidates for allowing us to catch Aaron up there. So we got great cooperation going on. So now we're going to move on to property taxes. This is a question specifically property taxes, although how it might relate to the other tax could be part of the answer. We do have a more general topic that's coming up next that we're going to allow more time on. But what I'd like to do is start with Shannon, and then we'll go with Scott, and then Aaron can finish with this issue of property taxes and what further role the state might have in either improving that situation or changing it or not. So yeah. Shannon, why don't you start?
Perfect. Depending upon where you live in Wisconsin, property taxes may have been, I'll say, relatively good to you of late, or maybe not, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I think as stewards of taxpayer money, we have to defend them at all times. Property taxes are a mitigating factor when people are considering moving to our area. And I talked earlier about the vacancies. We have a number of people aging, exiting the workforce. We have open jobs. They need to be filled. If our property taxes are too high, the result is that these people may not want to come here. They may not want to purchase homes in this area. We need to think about the elderly as well. We can't tax them certainly out of their homes. So, my philosophy in general, my fiscal philosophy in general, is to defend the taxpayers at all times. And the property tax is certainly one category where I think we have to be very mindful, both in the short term, in terms of those who live here now, but also with consideration for those who may move here in the future.
All right, very good. Scott, same topic, property taxes, and what would be your position on that?
We have to, in the state, be able to take care of what we need to, dealing with infrastructure, roads, all the other services. And the one problem is when you start squeezing the services and you don't raise the property taxes, or your elected local officials are not good stewards of the money, then your services will start going down. You have to make sure that when you're doing property taxes, especially I look at the county level and as the state level, you have to make sure that those businesses that are doing property taxes who are using many loopholes and causing a lot of the middle class to pick up that part of that property tax, which actually right now I heard that many businesses want to have their property taxes reassessed to pay a lower rate. Well, who's going to cover that hole when it's gone? It's going to be the middle class. It has to be fair across the board. They can't have it both ways, where they don't want to pay a health care for the workers, but then have low property taxes. Yet they have to be part of the system also.
All right, very good. And last but not least, Aaron, your take on property taxes in Wisconsin.
From my time serving on city council, I learned a lot about property taxes since that's where the city gets all of its money. And I had quite a few complaints about why our property tax is so high here. And I would tend to agree with the people that lived in River Falls that the property taxes were high, but relatively speaking, for the amount of service that everyone got, the city does a fantastic job of managing the limited property taxes we get. And how I would drive the state to help out not just District 30, River Falls, Hudson, but all of Wisconsin taxpayers, property taxpayers, is I would make the state funds that they had but then raided and got rid of, I would bring those back, make it easier for cities to get that money, so that way it could just lessen the impact of property taxes for the residents of cities.
All right, very good. Okay, now we come to kind of the potpourri or whatever topic you want to discuss that has not already been specifically discussed. So we've got healthcare, transportation, education, economy, jobs, property tax have pretty much been covered. Now this is 90 seconds to talk about maybe something that you would like to see the legislature address, and maybe it's a passion of yours, but something that you think can be improved by government. With that, I think we'll start, this time is it Scott's turn, I think, to go first. So with that, again, we had several topics that were suggested by the candidates, like campaign finance reform, the environment, veterans issues, the Second Amendment. So all of these might be suggestions, but you got free reign, Scott, so you got 90 seconds. Go ahead.
Well, the one issue that they don't talk about a lot, but it's basically a Republican administration down there, and they're of smaller government, and they want government to take care. Well, there's an issue that's huge in St. Croix County, and people talk about a lot. It's local control. It's a unique area. We can talk about how great it is for business. It's a unique area. It's a generator for businesses and things like that. St. Croix County had a 10-year comprehensive plan dealing with land use and the waters with the residents. That wasn't a Republican-Democrat thing. That was citizens of the county. And we, as residents of St. Croix County, know best what's for our area. Not what Madison does. Just because some people have a heartache about certain rules, that all of a sudden now we have a new state rule dealing with shoreland zoning, with our land uses. You need to let the local officials and the local departments have control of that area because they know the areas better. It's not for me to go down to Madison and say, Door County, I know how the state should manage your lands better than you. It's never going to happen. Or up in the north. You need to let the locals take care of it. Local control, bring it down to the elected officials, and also have them have the ability to actually do things at the elected at the county level instead of making everything become a referendum now. We got to stop running a lot of the state by referendums too. So that's some of the local controls are probably the best options for local people to take ownership of their area and not Madison dictating to us.
All right, very good. Okay, Shannon, your turn. What would you say would be an issue that we haven't already addressed that you would like to see emphasized?
All right, so my roots, my passion lie right here in District 30. And so when going to Madison, it's the interest here that I'm going to focus most on. We talked about economy and education. There's a third leg in this stool, I think. People don't just work and they don't just go to school. they also enjoy the environment. And by environment, I also include broader amenities, right? We enjoy some of the other small businesses within the area that maybe exist downtown Hudson or River Falls or Roberts and what have you. And so I think from a state standpoint, and also speaking from the perspective of experience, my wife, I, and our sons opened a winery outside of River Falls. And, the process of opening that revealed a lot of bureaucratic steps. And I think we should celebrate the entrepreneurs in these small businesses who are creating little venues for us to enjoy, to balance our lives with. So I would advocate in a variety of ways so that we can help the small businesses get started. Don't make it more difficult for them. They're taking a chance already by investing their hard-earned money into an endeavor that we all will benefit from. So when I think about other ways we can help balance things in this area, I think we need to make it friendly for these small businesses to complement all the other things we have going on here.
Very good. And again, you didn't use all your time, but now it's, Aaron, your turn to address topics that we haven't already touched upon.
All right, one big topic that I think has gone by the wayside in not just state government and some city governments or in the federal government is what is the role of government? Why is the government even here? So I'm going to give my personal opinion, and I'd like to say I'd speak for my generation and other generations. The role of government is to take care of its citizens and to enable them to succeed. It's not to tax all of their money away. It's not to start funding, this is some project that's going to help my donors get rich. In turn, they're going to help me get rich when I get out of government or for my campaign. The government should be to help its citizens succeed. And right now, in Madison, in the federal level, there's a real division in government. And it's not just red or blue, but even within the Democratic, Republican, Green Party, any of those other parties, the fracturization is just phenomenal. And the purpose of government is not happening. You could see it with the rising healthcare costs. You could see it with the wage not being increased. One positive thing that has happened is the FLSA stuff that goes into effect December 1st. That's maybe the only thing in the past 4 years that I feel is actually working for the people. So once we figure out what the role of government is again, we could reduce those fractures and fix it.
All right, very good. Well, that brings us now to our closing. And here, this is your pitch to ask for why voters, tell voters why they should elect you. And maybe you can draw a contrast. We just ask why would people vote for you as opposed to the other candidates. So with that, we've touched on many topics. Now you are allowed to revisit any of the issues you might have touched on before. Why don't we start with Shannon?
Okay. Well, in a lot of ways, I'm probably an unconventional politician because I've spent the last 20 years starting a business from nothing and growing it and facing all of the challenges that went along with that. Aaron talked about essentially polarization to some degree a moment ago, and I think that that's by and large what people are sick and tired of. And they want people who are results-oriented, people who can work through the challenges and the difficulties, people whose interests align to theirs. I have spent hours and hours and days probably walking the streets of North Hudson, Roberts, and River Falls. Running in a primary, I've seen a few thousand people now in this process, and I've heard them. And it's their voice that I will take with them. I don't need this job. I'm going there to accomplish some very specific objectives. I want to modify the education system, make it better for the schools, make it better for the students, and make it better for the employers. I want to foster and fan the flames of economic growth and development here. I want to have our jobs get filled here. And this is where I've lived. And so these are going to be the things I focus most on when representing this district in Madison. So I'm asking for the support of the voters. I'm asking for their vote on November 8th, and they can be assured they will have a fierce advocate for them in Madison.
Very good. And staying consistent, you didn't use all your time, but now, Aaron, you have 90 seconds to make your pitch to the voters.
So going back to more about me, I'm a analytical chemist by trade. I'm very fact and data driven. If the facts point towards one direction, then we should go with that direction. Big reason why I want to go to Madison as a representative is I'm willing to work with other legislators. I haven't taken any donations. I'm self-funding this campaign, which people call me crazy, and it's really expensive. And I just want my generation to have as good as the generations before mine, or better, because right now I don't feel like I'm getting that at all. And I'm not saying that either one of these two particularly have wronged my generation, but the system, it was set up for failure back when we had this two-party system designed and not officially adopted, but that's how it was. And if you want something to change, you can't keep doing the same thing. And I'm that something different. I'm coming in as independent. I am beholden to no party. I'm beholden to the people of Wisconsin, and specifically District 30.
Very good. All right. And now, Scott, you get to be the caboose and give your 90-second pitch to the voters of the 30th District.
Okay. Well, when I started this journey back in 1984 when I graduated high school, and I joined the military 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I never thought that my future would be in public service, but that's just the role I ran. I worked as an Air Force guy, so I can talk to veterans issues. I can walk the walk with veterans. I know. I support the veterans because I am one. Then when I worked in the fire department, I learned a lot of life lessons there too about how to be a leader, how to know that you have to make decisions, and decisions that affect a lot of people. And mine in the fire department were life and death a lot of times, and I'm lucky, knock on wood, that I made some pretty good decisions. Some of them, you were kind of thinking maybe twice about it. But I've learned also, as I've graduated up through the process, that on the county board, being nonpartisan, you learn right away to work with people who may agree or disagree with you. I can argue with a farmer just as good as I can with a lawyer to make sure that we have an issue that works collectively for the whole. And the one thing is we do have a lot of divisiveness, and it starts in Madison, and it's been trickling down. It's been at the national level too, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about local. And the reason I want your vote is because I want to take that voice from St. Croix County, Pierce County, the 30th Assembly District, down to Madison, because I think I can do the job, and I appreciate your vote and your support.
All right. Thank you. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us. I want to thank the candidates for coming in. And also just thank you for running it. I know what kind of a time commitment it is, and your willingness to be a public servant. Our audience right now is looking at one of the three of you will be our next assembly person from this district, and I want to wish each of you well, and good luck with the remaining time left in the campaign.
Thank you.
And thank you again for joining us on Western Wisconsin Journal.